Welcome back. Now, the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria remains a persistent challenge. According to the Child's Rights Act, every child is entitled to free, mandatory, and universal basic education provided for by the government. In Nigeria, about 10.5 million children are not in school, despite combined efforts by the Nigerian government, international development partners, and non-governmental organizations to tackle the menace. The country is still struggling to find solutions. A report by the United Nations Children Fund shows that 1 in every 5 of the world's out-of-school children is in Nigeria. UNICEF also, in its latest report released within the week, said Nigeria accounts for 15% of out-of-school children in the world. Well, joining us to discuss more is the founder and the chief executive of the IA Foundation, Ronke Adiagbo, who joins us via Zoom on the show this morning. Good morning to you, Ronke. Thank you for joining us on the program. It's a very heartbreaking situation. The statistics are not looking good for Nigeria, and the number of out-of-school children is a worrisome trend, which has implication on security, on the poverty level in the country, and on the social development level of the country. How terrible is the situation we are in right now with the number of out-of-school children?
Right, thanks for having me. The situation we are in at the moment is a ticking time bomb, and I just pray it doesn't explode in our faces. As you would appreciate, it's a consequence of us neglecting children on the streets ages ago, not paying attention to them. Those kids have now grown up. They are unemployable because they've got no skills, and therefore they've taken to crime. And because they've taken to crime, things like banditry and kidnapping, it's now affected schools because parents don't, particularly parents of girls, don't want to send their kids to school, going by the experience of the Chibok girls and the Dapchi girls and all that. So it's as a consequence of not paying attention. That's why we are in this difficult situation of insecurity. Therefore, any meaningful government will pay attention to this issue because it's a very, very serious issue. We have the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. That is not acceptable. Actually, UNESCO actually quoted the figures as 20.2 million. That's about 10% of our population. How can we have 10% of our population out of school, roaming the streets? So you can imagine the implication of that on the future manpower of the country. So we need to pay attention. It's not business as usual. We need to be intentional about addressing this issue. And that is why my foundation was set up about 5 years ago to go on the street, to pick up these out-of-school children, put them in school, and pay for their fees.
All right, Ronke, tell us what approach you would be suggesting now. Statistics go on to say that this humongous figure falls largely within the Northwest region. Kano State, for example, is recording at least 1 million of these out-of-school children, many of whom are girls. What approach would you be proffering to reduce these numbers to the barest minimum?
Right. I think we need to put this into context first, because we need to look at the various reasons why we have such high number of out-of-school children, and then we'll be able to approach those issues in a segmented way. Now, one of the reasons why we have a high number of out-of-school children, as we appreciate, is education. I will look at it from 3 categories: education, economics, and also social-cultural. Now, from the education perspective, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, UBEC wrote a report saying we need 20,000 more classrooms. So let's just assume, peradventure, that these 20.2 million are ready to go to school. The classrooms are not there. So the point I'm making is that even the educational infrastructures are not there. Secondly, for where we have the educational school, the schools, the security in the schools is nothing to write home about. Some schools don't even have perimeter fences. So there's no prizes for guessing why the kids are always being kidnapped. There needs to be more budgetary allocation allocated to education. I am very happy with the current government because they seem to be educationally friendly. Because just last month, the Minister of Education said the budgetary allocation for education will increase by 25%. I mean, institutions all over the world have been crying that we need to increase our budgetary allocation for education. At the moment, we only spend 8.2% on education. We need double digits. So we're looking forward to the extra resources that will be put into education. Secondly, we've got the issues of insecurity. So because the schools are insecure, parents don't want to send their children to school. So if the schools are secured, maybe parents will be encouraged to send their kids to school. Also, as I said, with regards to poverty, because there's a cost implication for sending children to school. It's not free. And I can tell you that for free because we pay fees of over 200 kids in school. Most parents are poor in the north and they can't afford to send their kids to school. Therefore, they rather have their kids as child labor to earn income for the family. Also, sociocultural issues, which is with regards to, they believe the kitchen is the best place for a girl. They are basically a domestic appendages. But we need to reorientate parents in the north to make them realize that that was in the past. Now, women are in the forefront. Most of the banks in the country are being led by women. We've got Ngozi on the world stage, portraying Nigeria well. So it's important that we invest in the education of girls. Therefore, the solution to this is to make sure we sort of incentivize parents to send their kids to school. So for instance, we might say, if you send your child to school, we would actually give that child a scholarship if you send that child to school. Also, what we could do is to introduce penalties. If you don't send your child to school, you get penalized. The IA Foundation is based in the UK, right? In the UK, if you don't send your child to school, you get penalized. In Nigeria, if you don't send your child to school, nobody's bothered, nobody's asking you. We need to put some legislation, some teeth towards it to encourage parents to send their kids to school.
Okay, well, let me come in from this angle. One would have thought that the school feeding program brought up by the previous administration will have helped to reduce this issue of out-of-school children. Tell us more about this initiative. Will this also reduce drastically the out-of-school children that we have in Nigeria at the moment?
Yeah, the school feeding program is a brilliant initiative. Actually, it was copied from the UK because they call theirs a free school meal. So children from deprived backgrounds are given free meal at school. So it's a good one. However, even if you are giving the kids food, which is a good carrot to dangle in front of the kids, because as you know, if kids do not eat because they are poor, then they would not be able to assimilate in the classroom. So it's a welcome development. However, you cannot say because you're giving the kids food that they will come to school when the school is not secured, when the educational infrastructure are not in place, when there are no quality teachers. So you need to address this from both ends. Yes, attract them with the free school meal, but at the same time, invest in the educational system, make sure we have good teachers, make sure we have good educational facilities, and also ensure we support parents, the deprived parents, to encourage them to send their kids to school. So there needs to be lots of orientation, going around, telling them the advantage of sending their children to school. It's not just about the food. So the food is good, but we need to do more.
All right, Ronke, let's look beyond the government side now and look at regulation of the educational sector. We know that most of the schools in Nigeria are run by private individuals. That's the most, accessible for many Nigerians because government schools are, oversubscribed. A lot of students and many of them not getting the adequate education. Do you think the education sector in Nigeria needs to be regularized? And I bring this question because we see schools charge exorbitant fees for basic education, which should be the right of every child. We see that many schools do not even have the standard facilities to ensure that these children have the proper education academically and which will even help them build their mind. Do you think perhaps the education sector in Nigeria, the lack of regulation is also contributing to the number of out-of-school children? There was a trending video some years back where we saw children being sent out of school because their parents could not pay the fees. And because we see some children who will not even come back to school after that, that situation. What would you advocate as a stakeholder about ensuring that the education sector in Nigeria is properly regulated by the government?
Right. My first reaction to that is that every sector needs to be regulated. right? Not just the educational sector. Because some of the issues we're dealing with are multifaceted, right? So you can't just regulate one sector and not regulate the other. You must regulate all sectors in Nigeria. Now, as you would appreciate, education is free up to GSS 3. It's a fundamental basic right. So there's a social contract between the citizens and the government. Now, the reason why private educators are thriving is because there is a gap in the provision of education from the government. So therefore, they've seen a niche and they've jumped into that niche and they're actually, trying to milk it as much as possible. Now, I won't blame them because any right-thinking business person, wherever they see a business opportunity, they will jump into it. But at the moment, they are trying their best to make sure they balance their books. And they're also trying to make a profit because it's a business. So I cannot fault them for increasing their fees because they need to cover their cost. Where my emphasis will be is for the government to make it unattractive for private sector to actually jump into that gap which they have provided. Because if the government has blocked the gap themselves, whereby they have made enough provision, they've made enough educational provision for children, then you won't have many people attending private schools and paying such exorbitant prices. Also, the quality of the education, because most parents want their kids to have quality education. Even if they want to send their kids to a government school, because the quality of the education is poor, they would then have to send their kids to private school. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's a failing of the government. That is why that sector is thriving. It's not as a consequence of lack of regulation.
And regarding failure of government, there's also the issue, according to observers, that the idea of free education, especially at primary school level, free and compulsory education for all primary school students in the country is practically, in reality, not existent. And so how do we go about it? Because there does appear to be a form of donor weariness. How do we come out of this? Do you see the private sector, teaming up with the public sector, with the government, especially in these major regions where these statistics are dire? What do you think in reality can be done as a quick fix?
Right. I mean, the reality of it is that the government cannot do it alone. Yes, we all know it's the government's responsibility to provide basic education, but the stark reality is that they can't do it alone. So we need to have a joined-up approach. NGOs, private educators, and the government must all, and the corporate world must all work together to make sure we can get these kids off the street, put them in the classroom, and make sure they get education. Because the issue we are looking at here is, in future, it will affect the manpower of the country. So we all have a stake in ensuring that these kids are properly educated. So I tend to believe that if the government has got the political will, and I have so much confidence in the current Minister of Finance because he's got a very solid background in education, right? So I so much believe in him, and my foundation is observing what he's doing at the moment, right? So if we have the right government government inputs into the process, and we have the political will, and they back it up with good budgetary allocation, maybe like 15% of the total budget, of the total government budget is going to education. Quickly, the sector will develop capacity and will grow and be able to accommodate these kids that are on the school or on the street and get them educated. So we really need to pump a lot of money. A huge investment needs to go into education, and very, very quickly as well.
Well, can you suggest to Nigerians and the federal government other creative ways that the federal government can generate more money to fund education in Nigeria?
Right. We've got international organizations, the likes of UNICEF, the likes of UNESCO, even World Bank, and even some major funds, because I was at a conference 2 years ago where they said they were going to donate to Nigeria to enable them actually reduce the number of out-of-school children. So we can leverage on these global institutions to encourage them to give us funds to be able to, kickstart the process. we really need to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap, because we need to go out there and make it obvious that, you know what, yes, we have a problem. We admit we have a problem. We need your support in ensuring that we can address the problem. So we shouldn't be shy about it, because if we have to rely on the budgetary allocation of the government, in my opinion, it might not address the issue very, very quickly. This is a burning platform, and we really need to do something very, very quickly. So let's go out there to the UNESCO's, UNICEFs of this world to encourage them to donate money towards the education, towards basic education in Nigeria.
We must say a very big thank you to you, Ronke Adeagbo, the founder and chief executive of the IA Foundation. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insight about the concerns around out-of-school children in Nigeria. But before we let you go, one quick question. What would you suggest about the Al-Majiri education program that was implemented by the former president, President Goodluck Jonathan? Do you think perhaps the current administration can borrow some tips from that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, actually. As I said earlier, when I was enumerating the issues, I said there was a social-cultural aspect of it. Now, Al-Majiri is a religious issue. Now, there's nothing stopping children from getting religious education. After all, the Christians as well have Sunday school on Sundays where they give their children religious education. So there's nothing wrong with the Al-Majiri system. However, if children can go to Al-Majiri, the Arabic schools, and they are learning the Quran, I think they have the capacity to be able to learn Western education as well. So Western education and religious education can go side by side. In my opinion, it's two sides of the same coin. So we should make sure we entwine the two and make sure both of them can be delivered without deterring on one. You understand? So it's important, because you can't just have religious education and no Western education. It won't take you too far. So both should go hand in hand.
Well, a big thank you to you, Ronke. That was a very good way to end the conversation. Thank you for being a part of our conversation this morning. And on behalf of my other colleague, Kemi and Emmanuel, we say a very big thank you to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.